Welcome, Beth. I'm so excited. Thank you so much for joining us in the IHP podcast.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here with you, Kate.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit more about you and about your nonprofit.
So I have been trying to understand what I call the epidemic of chronic health conditions in children for about 15 years. I also have called it the new childhood epidemics because these are things that didn't really exist just a few decades ago. But now we're seeing, just breathtaking rates of pretty much any kind of chronic health or developmental condition you could imagine. So escalating rates of autism, ADHD, asthma, allergies, autoimmune diseases, conditions that are reasonably new, like PANS or PANDAS. These are all just taking off in children. So I have wanted to get to the root of it. Why are we seeing so many sick kids, right? It's supposed to be a time in your life when you're the healthiest, right? But now we have more than half of American children with some kind of chronic condition. So I've dedicated the last 15 years of my life to understanding the why, but also what we can do to help kids reverse their chronic health conditions and even their developmental conditions, things that people think are lifelong are actually not necessarily lifelong. So I've written a couple books on that subject, and I have started a nonprofit organization called Epidemic Answers. And we also have a special research project called Documenting Hope, which is doing just that. We're trying to document that there is hope for reversal of these chronic conditions in kids.
Wow, that's amazing. And I know when I first connected with you, one of the things I was so excited about and why I'm so excited for this conversation is because you guys are utilizing the integrative approach, just like IHPs do with adults. You're bringing that to children. And as you said, it's an epidemic, and all of our kids are getting sick and they're having chronic conditions, whether it's in the mental health side of things or it's chronic gut issues. And I struggled with this when I was a kid as well. I was a very, very sick kid. And I now understand why. But back then, there was no one who could really help me. And so this podcast and this conversation, I'm so excited to dive into kind of what you're seeing the most of and what are you seeing kind of the biggest takeaways from your study and from working with all these kids and all your research.
So, well, there's a lot that we're seeing. I think one of the interesting things about the new childhood epidemics is that people don't often see it as a singular thing. They usually see it in discrete silos, like the obesity epidemic. Like everybody knows we have an obesity epidemic, but they don't necessarily see it as part of the autism epidemic, which is its own separate epidemic. But the reality is, if you look at any of these diagnostic labels, you're going to actually see some of the same physiological imbalances, regardless of what your diagnosis is. So you're going to see oxidative stress. These kids have tremendous amounts of inflammation. Again, whether it's asthma, ADHD, or obesity, they all have inflammation, nutritional deficiencies across the board. So if you compare any of these people who have diagnoses compared to healthy children who don't have symptoms or diagnoses, they're not going to have those kinds of things: nutrient deficiencies, inflammation, oxidative stress, cellular toxicity. So that's the most, I think, important takeaway, is that it almost doesn't matter what your diagnosis is. The fact that you have symptoms, the fact that you have something that's showing up for you, maybe it's as far as a diagnosis, it means something's out of balance in your body. And the good news is that most of these conditions are treatable through modifiable lifestyle factors, through diet, through nutrition, through the way that you embrace sleep and movement in your life, the way that you think about the products, the consumer products in your life. So we've actually seen through anecdotes, and now we're doing some research on it, that the things that are in and around your life, again, the things you're eating, the things you're putting on your skin, the things that are in your home environment, those all add up to a total load of or a body burden that results in symptoms. So I think that is the one thing that we see happening that precipitates the epidemic. But the thing that most people don't know is when you actually work on reducing that load, reduce that body burden, people's symptoms and diagnoses start going away. So again, we've been doing this. I've been studying this anecdotally for 15 years. I chase the people who have these success stories. They have a child who had autism and then didn't, or they overcame some kind of autoimmune condition. So I said, well, what did you do? How did you do this? What led to your reversal or your recovery? And so when you follow those anecdotes, you'll see it's really about people changing their lifestyle, changing their diet, reducing the total burden of health stressors on their body, and then increasing the health supports, whatever that may be. That may be sleep, that may be relationships that are loving and supportive, So there's lots of paths to wellness, but it all kind of follows that same formula, which is, the more stressors you have, the worse your health outcomes will be. The more you reduce those stressors and increase your health supports, the better the health outcomes. I mean, it sounds like a very simple formula, but at the basic level, that's really what I see going on. And now we're trying to put some scientific evidence behind it so that people will actually believe it. So it comes out of the world of anecdote and moves into the world of science.
It sounds exactly like what we're doing with adults is, the heavier your burden, the more stressors you have, the more toxins you have in your life, the sicker you are. And, all of these diseases or labels are really just imbalances in the body, right? And so it sounds like you're dealing with the same things and you're seeing the same things with kids, because when I talk to a lot of moms or health coaches who are trying to work with kids, they're trying to figure out how to get the healthy food into their kids, which is a really big deal. It's really hard to get picky eaters to eat green things or to increase their variety. But you can actually make a massive difference by removing the bad, just like you're doing with adults. Mm-hmm. If we look at the de-stress protocol, which, is diet and it's exercise and it's stress reduction, all those same things can be applied to kids. And so if you're a parent, reducing the toxins in your kitchen, in their toothpaste, in their hair, products, kind of lessening their load in that way, it sounds like is going to make the same type of difference as it does in adults, which is a really wonderful thing, because as more health coaches are having kids and parents come to them, it's as you're starting to de-stress and remove toxins from your home, you're impacting the entire family, not just one person. So I think that's a really powerful message, is when you're doing these things for yourself, for your husband, for your older kids, it's actually going to impact the entire family. Cleaning up your air, cleaning up your water, all these things are going to reduce the toxic burden and the total stressors on the body.
Right.
Is that kind of what you're seeing?
Yeah. And it's interesting how a lot of people think that when they have an affected child, whether it's autism or an autoimmune disease or whatever it is, they might be like, all right, we're going to change her diet or his diet. We're going to make some changes for my child. But that's not how the success stories emerge. They happen when the whole family goes in, right? And as you said, the byproduct of maybe changing your child's diet, which then leads to changing the whole family's diet, is that everybody gets better, right? All those health conditions and symptoms will, dad loses weight and mom feels less anxiety or whatever it is. So I always say that it should be a family endeavor. And, sometimes it's like mom's like, I'm going to go on a health kick and I'm going to clean myself up. That's great. Bring the whole rest of the family along with you, and sometimes that can be hard, if your spouse isn't on board, or, if you feel like you're kind of on an island. It's really helpful to connect with other families who are trying to do the same thing, because it normalizes it. This is one of the fundamental problems I see with health in this country, is that normal is unhealthy. Like all the things that we do that are normal, people go to, sporting events and there's just junk food everywhere. That's normalized in our culture. And then the toxins, like the beauty products, the things that we see on TikTok or Instagram all day long, are usually toxic products. But again, they're normalized, they're culturally normalized for us. So what you need to do is start actually living counterculture and doing things that are more natural, embracing things that are more natural. And I think as a society, we're kind of moving that way, where our products are becoming cleaner, our cleaning products are becoming cleaner, and that you have more choices today than ever before. But when you get a friend involved or another family who's like, we're all going low tox, like we're going to do no tox living, we're going to change our diet, we're all going gluten-free or we're all going grain-free or whatever it is, it helps a lot because it makes you feel less alone. Health coaches can be great that way too, because they help, figure out, how do I navigate this? Or, how do I learn how to change my diet? I'm a huge proponent of using health coaches to help your family make the lifestyle changes that you need to, partly because, they're a lot more accessible than some of the concierge functional medicine doctors that, can be really expensive and you require a lot of testing. And sometimes you just need help, cleaning up the home and changing the diet.
Yeah. And that's exactly, I totally agree, because again, it's so much of the foundations. Yes, some kids and the families are going to have deeper root causes. Maybe they have parasites or they have yeast overgrowth. So they have, some of those things, or gut dysbiosis because of, antibiotics. But fixing the foundations for the entire family and your friends and, make, like you said, normalizing it, I think is so important because you're already going to get them 50 to 70% of the way just with those foundations. And then they're already feeling better. And just like with adults, they'll have more motivation to keep going because, I'm working with some kids right now who are 8, 9 years old and, they are doing some of those things, but sometimes they need a bigger win. Right. And they need to feel that because maybe they're struggling with mental health issues and they need to feel that win. What have you found to give them the biggest win kind of quickly to keep them motivated?
I think, especially for children, there's a lot that is mysterious to the parents' behaviors in particular. You may have a child who has an ADHD diagnosis. A lot of that's behavioral stuff. That is what, brings the parent to the doctor to get the diagnosis in the first place. Certainly with autism spectrum disorders, behavior is what motivates a lot of parents to get the help and support that they need. But if you are seeing behavioral things, it's really important to be thinking about what might those triggers be, what might be triggering the behaviors. And that could be any number of things, but if you start journaling, you want to talk about quick wins, the best thing you can do to sort of experience the quick wins is to journal, meaning every day. I used to actually do this with my kids. I had sort of like a chart and I would say, all right, what are they eating? What were the behaviors after eating? Did they nap? Did they sleep? What were the behaviors when they woke up? And when you start journaling, you actually start connecting the dots about things that might be triggers in and around their environment that precipitate these kinds of behaviors. So when I say behaviors, a lot of times I'm talking about like tantruming, like especially for younger children, but you can see this in kids 8, 9, 10, all the way into high school. And a lot of those triggers can be food, right? So food is supposed to nourish our bodies, but in the modern world, because of what you just described, gut dysbiosis, inflammation, a toxicity in our food, you have a lot of people who've developed sensitivities to their food. And what do these sensitivities trigger? Any number of symptoms. It can trigger, red rages and anger. It can trigger, changes in handwriting. It can trigger a child to like wet themselves, even though they've been potty trained for years. It can trigger rashes or eczema. All kinds of symptoms can be triggered by the inflammation that's created by food. So it's the foods we typically eat the most, right? When you have that gut dysbiosis and you have what's called intestinal hyperpermeability or leaky gut, your underdigested food molecules are going to make it through your GI, into the circulatory system, and your immune system is going to pick up and be like, hey, that's an invader. That's not supposed to be here. So what does it do? It creates inflammation. And again, that inflammation can happen in the brain. It can happen anywhere that comes out to the skin. So I would say, if you really want to figure out what's the biggest bang for the buck that I can get from my child, if I'm seeing rashes, behavior, toileting issues, constipation, or chronic diarrhea, anything like that, mysterious symptoms, you don't know what's causing it, journal. Watch what your child's eating and see if you can track, like, oh gosh, every time they had a bagel, this is what happened. We had constipation for 3 days, or every time they had orange juice, they had a red rage afterwards. I mean, you will be surprised the things that you can learn just by logging and paying attention to the food that goes in, the behaviors that come out, and the stooling. Stooling is actually a really great tool for parents to try and figure out what might be triggering something in my child. And it's not like that's the beginning and end, that's all the answers. But what it does tell you is if you have something actionable. By removing those foods that trigger your child, you're going to be able to bring down that inflammation, get a more calm, regulated state for kids who have behavioral issues. If it's like a rash that you're seeing, that'll, remove the trigger for that rash. And again, keep the inflammation down. So I feel like that is, a lot of times people are looking for, really deep diagnostics to find out what's going on functionally. But sometimes you have, the greatest answers right there every day by just observing your child and observing what they're doing and what the output is, from food and other kinds of things.
That's such great advice. It's just the journal. It's so simple. But, I know so many parents who don't even do that. And, I tell them, okay, look at the gluten, look at the big allergens, because, that could be a really big trigger for them. But it is recognizing the triggers and it's paying attention because with sensitivities, it could take 3 days for a symptom to develop, whereas certain ones might happen immediately. And really having that log, especially if they are having behavioral issues and if they are having, something come up really quickly, like a rash. But you've also got the kids who maybe are just very, very toxic because they're not active. They don't exercise. They don't sweat. They don't drink enough water. I'm actually dealing with a lot of kids with exactly this. They're starting to smell a lot and their acne is starting to come up. And as soon as they start drinking water and sweating, that all goes away. And so it's also like looking at some of these kind of essentials and basics, like the overtoxicity and how much that could be impacting them if they're not doing a lot of moving. And so I love the journaling part of that. And when you focus on the journaling and recognizing the triggers, how often are you recommending something like functional testing or for kids to go through protocols like yeast protocols or parasite protocols? Does that come up much with you guys?
So we don't ever believe in any kind of protocols because it's all bio-individual, right? And I think the challenge is figuring out is what does this individual child need? And it's going to be different from a sibling in the family, right? So every child's needs are different. Why? Because what got them to that place of chronic health condition in the first place took, a long time. Usually, it's layer upon layer upon a layer of environmental assaults and different kinds of exposures and experiences that they've had. And every individual person's path to sickness is different. So it's like peeling the layers of the onion back. But I feel like there is so much that can be done by just working on those foundations. So like before you're thinking about protocols or like functional med testing, again, which can be expensive, you want to start with all the foundational stuff, like you said, water, sleep. Like a lot of times parents don't know what sleep should look like for a child because it changes over time, right? So like little babies need a lot of sleep, right? And as they get older, that sleep requirement diminishes. And then when they get to be teenagers again, it kicks up again. So just Googling, you can find out like what's age appropriate for how much sleep, what time should my child go to bed? A lot of times people are like, we're in this digital world and we have the lights on and devices going well into the, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. That's terrible for children. We need to be like winding down, turning the lights down, getting into sort of natural rhythms. Like those are the foundations: water, sleep, pooping. Child should be pooping at least every day, if not, twice, 3 times a day. And if those things aren't in place, then you can start, you're not going to be able to get much out of the other kinds of things you're going to pursue. You have to put the foundations in place. Of course, food being one of the most important foundations, and that is whole food, organic foods. You're not putting anything in that's causing any kinds of inflammation, removing food sensitivities that you might suspect, those foundations. And as far as protocols are concerned, there's so many different tools out there. There's like all kinds of natural approaches that are very gentle and low risk for children. Like we're not talking about any pharmaceutical protocols. We're talking about maybe you need to be taking some nutritional supplements because your digestion is such that you don't break the food down appropriately. Maybe you need some digestive enzymes, or maybe you need, additional antioxidants in your diet, or you need additional levels of zinc because your body is, deficient in it, or what have you. So there's nutritional supplements that you can use, and you can do that through there's all kinds of testing you can do and tailored approaches. And then, of course, there's all kinds of chronic infections that our kids have. And that's another kind of like, if you're thinking protocols, but those are kind of the advanced layers. Remember I talked about the layers of the onion. You do all the foundational pieces, all the outside pieces of the onion. And if you're still dealing with a lot of those chronic issues, then you start looking deeper, the chronic infections. Maybe there's some toxicity I'm not aware of, like mold in our environment. A lot of people have mold in their environment. It's a chronic source of immune stimulation, right? Chronic source of inflammation for our body. So that's like another layer. But again, it's going to be bio-individual. And the best thing a parent can do is recognize and own that they are the best person to solve the mystery, to solve to peel the layers back, because they know their child's history better than anyone. They know what the daily exposures are, right? So that's, a hard thing for people sometimes because, we all want to trust a doctor or I didn't go to medical school, so I can't possibly know how to help my child's health. Well, that's actually not true. Before, in the 19th century and 20th century, we had parents who were just leading the charter on their children's health. And we just need to kind of go back to that place where we accept responsibility for our children's health and start using our very intelligent minds to help navigate it.
Exactly. I think you're so right, is that just like with adults, it's so bio-individual, and so many people are looking for that silver bullet to fix their sleep. But if you're not willing to do the work and look back at the foundations, if you're not able to recognize that they're on screens until 11 p.m., And screens are totally impacting REM sleep and, deep sleep and all these things. And if they're not drinking anything, that's going to impact every cell in their body. And so it is really just so important to make sure those foundations are met. Just like with adults, foundations are more important than any supplement you could ever take. And, this is something that I work with kids on now, is the kids who just will not eat anything with color. They will not have any variety. They change their mind on what they're going to eat every single week. And for them, it's really been, for me, about giving them easy to consume, maybe not even supplements, maybe drinks. I found drinks to be so helpful, because if you find like a fruit and vegetable drink, or a drink that's got, the multivitamin in it that tastes like chocolate, it's a lot easier to get in for the kids that are not willing to eat protein even. I have a niece who's unwilling to eat any protein pretty much. And, how important that is. And so if the parents can recognize what those key foundations are that are missing, and really focus on that and get creative with how to help fill those foundations, right, again, that's going to get them 90% of the way.
And I think there's different strategies you can take too with children. I think one of the biggest challenges that parents face is what you describe as the picky eating. And, a lot of times it's like the children only eat white foods, or as you said, don't eat protein, or don't eat just whatever it is. The picky eating is such a challenge. And first of all, there can be like oral motor issues, that could be diagnosed by a functional dentist or a myofunctional therapist, where, the child really does have like chewing and swallowing issues. Like that's one thing to sort of like clear off, or like a tongue tie or something similar. But, just for the regular old picky eating, it's important to remember that, that picky eating developed over time. So, sometimes you have to really commit to giving it time, right, to get out of those habits. But also remember that a lot of times it's not the kid that's choosing the food. It's like the gut bacteria. It's literally the gut bacteria that are like sending signals to your brain to say like, I want the white carbs because that's what I need. That's the fuel I need. That's when you have an overgrowth of a yeast or a bacteria that isn't supposed to be overgrown like that. Sometimes that happens. It's literally like out of your control. That's why we have these addictions sometimes. So I think, and there's, again, a couple strategies, and you have to decide what's right for you as a family. But I've been listening to people's stories for 15 years. What did you do to change the diet? There are some people that are like, we're ripping this Band-Aid off and we're going in, we're taking everything out of our house. And we're only going to bring in the food that I want my kids to eat. And a lot of times it means you don't go to the birthday parties for a little while. That's okay. Like until you've gotten sort of the new pattern and the new habit, like sometimes you need to do that. And I've seen people really struggle with that. My child didn't eat for 48 hours because I didn't have the macaroni and cheese and the milk and the things they wanted. But you keep offering it with love, and your child will eat. It will come around. I've seen families do that. I've also seen families use a great strategy, which is substitutions, substituting their favorite foods with better choices, and making those changes slowly over time. And a strategy that I love and I think is very, very effective is to always put whatever it is you want your child to eat, always put it on the plate. They won't eat it. It's fine. Keep putting it there. Do it 10 days in a row. You're going to waste food. Like you got to just sort of like, all right, I'm going to waste a lot of food for like 2 weeks. Right? Just keep putting, like it's sauerkraut, for example. Sauerkraut's a great, fermented food, can be really wonderful for developing that robust diversity of microbiomes in your gut. Most kids aren't going to eat that, are they? They're like, sauerkraut, I would never eat that. Put a little on the plate. They don't eat it. Next day, put it on the plate. Keep putting it on the plate. And then eventually they'll taste it. You can challenge them too. I used to do this really great trick with my kids where I would put, I wanted them to eat a certain amount of like fruits and vegetables every day. So I'd put like a challenge, like on a piece of paper. I'd be like, all right, if you get to 11 fruits and vegetables today, like you're getting to the top of the fruit and vegetable challenge. And like each day they'd work up to it. And they literally saw it as like a game, like, oh, my goal, I had 11 fruits today, Mom, I had 12 vegetables, You have to make it fun too. Like it doesn't necessarily have to be the like, eat the sauerkraut, eat it now. There's so much stress that we as parents want our kids to eat well. But if you try and make it a game and try and make it fun, like I challenge you, can you do it? And there's varying degrees of capacity that children have, especially kids with developmental needs. So, you have to do what you can do within your child's pace. But I would say you have to be persistent. At the end of the day, it's not going to happen in 2 days. It might take 3 days, it might take 3 weeks, it might take 3 months, but you just keep doing it, knowing that your child will come around and trusting that they will come around, but you got to keep at it and keep persistent.
I love turning it into a game. That is such a good idea. And being willing to waste food, I think that's great as well. So tell us a little bit more about the studies that you're running and potentially how people can get involved or how they can donate.
Mm-hmm. So we have 2 studies under the umbrella of the Documenting Hope Project. The first study is called the CHIRP study, and that stands for Child Health Inventory for Resilience and Prevention, which is a long way of saying we want to understand what it is that children in modern America are doing. What are they eating? What are they exposed to? What was their health history like? What was mom's health history and dad's health history and multiple generations back? We want to know all those factors because we know we have an epidemic of chronic health conditions. We know that the total load plays a factor, but what's that look like? And are there some environmental exposures that are worse than others? So we designed a survey that's over 1,000 questions long. It takes the average parent between 4 and 6 hours to finish. You can do it in dribs and drabs and little, you can log in, log out. And we've been running that study since 2018, ostensibly. And that has given us a ton of information about what, children's exposures are and how it correlates with health outcomes. So, we're finding a confirmation of our total load hypothesis. Again, the more health stressors, the worse the health outcomes. Our data is supporting that from the CHIRP study. We've also found some of the most impactful stressors. In other words, we know all the little things add up, all the chemicals, all the exposures, all the bad things in our diet, it all matters. But there are some ones that are like big baddies. And we've found that people who've had lots of rounds of antibiotics have worse health outcomes. It's probably the most impactful environmental exposure you could have according to our preliminary data. It's not published yet. And then we have a second study. And the second study is built on the premise that, okay, we know that the total load of stressors matters for people's health. What happens if we reduce that total load? And what happens if we increase the health supports? So that study is an intervention study. It's called the FLIGHT study. It stands for Facilitated Longitudinal Intensive Investigation of Genuine Health Transformation, because that's what we'd all like to see. So the FLIGHT study is, it's multi-year, and we stagger start and enroll children who have one of several chronic health conditions, could be autism, ADHD, asthma, allergies, all the things that I mentioned. And we give them, each child, a 18-month-long program. It's bio-individual, where we basically do a whole series of assessments to find out sort of where the imbalances are. And we work with the families to try and help support them as they move through their health journey, reducing the stressors, increasing the supports. And then we document anything you can to measure the child's health progress over the 18 months. So we take things that are minimally invasive and blood, urine, stool. We also do QEEGs on the children to see what changes happen over time. We had 2 children enrolled in that study currently. One child has autism and one child has alopecia universalis. So he has no hair on his body, although since he's been in our study, he's starting to grow back eyebrows, eyelashes, and a little bit of hair on his head. And you can follow along with the families in our study because we're also, we're sharing the information as we go through a blog and through videos. We're documenting the whole thing on film because we want to be able to capture if there's a health transformation when you make these lifestyle changes, but also, give people hope and inspiration that this is possible for them too. And that's really the whole premise of the Documenting Hope project, is to gather evidence of hope, evidence that these are modifiable factors that are a function of modern living that we can all take action on. We can all reduce our total load stressors. We can all increase our health support. So that really is meant to inspire people to make changes for their own family.
Wow, those are incredible. So are you looking for more participants?
So right now, the CHIRP study is technically on hold because the software platform that it was on was recently decommissioned, and we are loading it onto a new one. So it'll be up and running in just a couple months.
Okay.
So that will be available. And if you go to documentinghope.com and you can put your email in, and get on our email list, because we will be sending out notification when that study opens again. And the best part about the study is that we wanted to make sure for people who participate in it that we give something back. So anybody who participates in the study gets personalized report back that basically highlights all of the stressors in your child's life. As an example, we ask questions about everything. So we ask about, are there smelly candles in your house, fragrance candles, artificially fragranced candles in your house? You check yes. And what you're going to get back in your report is a report with all of your answers. And the ones that are health stressors are highlighted in orange. So the smelly candles are going to be highlighted in orange. So you're going to look at this. Maybe you didn't know fragrance candles are actually endocrine disrupting and bad for your child. So you're going to get a report that highlights in orange all the things that you can take action on that are, documented in the medical literature to be health stressors. So everybody learns something new. Even people, I've had board members who've been, steeped in this work for 10 years, and they've taken the survey and been like, oh, well, there was a couple of things in there I didn't know about. So that's one way to get involved. And then the second study is it's in Virginia right now, Northern Virginia, but we're going to be moving to a second location. So we're raising money to put this in a new location. So we take 3 children at a time. So we had 1, 2 in Northern Virginia. We're going to be taking a third soon. And then we'll move to another location. So each time we move to another location, we raise the money for 3 kids. We kind of think about doing them in a pod. And the reason why we're moving locations is because we want to study what we call the community-based model that's happening anyway. So there's these integrative physicians out there that are working with health coaches and nutritionists, and there are teams of people that are approaching this kind of chronic health condition or these kinds of chronic health conditions from a whole child perspective. So we're basically studying how those people work and how they help families as they move through their journey. So it's important to us that we do this in multiple locations so that there isn't some kind of notion that there's some special sauce to the team that we're working with in Northern Virginia, that they're some like magical healers. No, this is available in many, many, many communities around the world. So we want to be able to study it and understand it in different settings. So we're wrapping up our Virginia one next year, and then we'll be opening a new location, TBD at the moment.
That's amazing. So can you repeat the website again and also tell people if they want to follow along, if they're interested in being a participant, where can they find you on social? Just kind of give us some of that info.
Sure. So the research website is documentinghope.com. And that's where you'll find about the CHIRP study and the flight study. And you can read more about the families that have already enrolled and are participating, and you can follow along with their journey. Make sure you get in our email list again, because when that CHIRP study opens again, you can get a notification. And then we have a whole bunch of resources for parents. So the research is just one aspect of what we do. We also have a website dedicated to free resources for parents and practitioners, and that's called epidemicanswers.org. And epidemicanswers.org has a free practitioner directory, a health coach directory. We train health coaches. We do monthly webinars with some of the most amazing experts, like all the gurus you can think of that, have really interesting insights into how to do this rehabilitative work. We've, interviewed over 100 people. It's all in our free webinar database. And then we also have another resource that we've launched just this year for parents, which is a community. We call it Healing Together. And this is a part of, what I started out talking about, which is you can't do this alone. You need to be in community with people. And you might have a sister or a friend or somebody who's in your community who is doing this journey with you. But if you don't, or even if you do, we created an online community so that people could feel supported. And in that community, we meet twice a month live via Zoom call, so you can connect with the other parents. Sometimes we have practitioners on there who just want to learn. We host a live call once a month with integrative physicians who can answer your questions. And then we have a live call once a month with health coaches also who can answer your questions or just have a general discussion about the healing process. So that's Healing Together. And you can find that links to that on either one of our websites. And then finally, the last thing I'll say is we have a conference now. So we'll be having our conference in Orlando next year, November 15th through 17th. And we call that Adventures in Healing, because that's really what we want people to see this as, not this, overwhelming challenge, but like dig into it like it's an exciting challenge, like climbing a mountain. Is climbing a mountain easy? Nope. It's hard work. But when you get to the top, it is so worth it, right? Like it's absolutely a challenge that is worthwhile taking on. So that one, you can also go to conference.documentinghope.com and you'll get to see more information about that. We'll be loading on the speakers in the coming weeks.
Amazing. Well, you've got so many great resources for parents and obviously for the entire family. And I'm so happy and excited for people to go check those out. There've been so many good takeaways from this. Just again, as we're looking back at the integrative health side of things, is really looking at the importance of foundations and of the total load on the body, and how reducing that, not just for the kids, but for the entire family, is really going to make a huge impact for everybody. And thank you so much for joining me today. I know this was invaluable for our audience. And thank everyone who is listening in on any platform. Make sure to subscribe and, join us for our next podcasts. And again, make sure to check out the links that Beth mentioned. We're going to have them in the show notes. And again, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure.